Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives, learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Don Chu joining us. Don is a world-recognized expert on corporate finance and is the author of The Making of Modern Corporate Finance, A History of the Ideas and How They Help Build the Wealth of Nations. He's also the founding editor and editor-in-chief of the Journal of Applied Corporate Finance, a publication that he started back in 1988. The academic in me, the PhD candidate in me from the mid-90s is remembering Don and the JACF. So thank you for joining me on the show today, Don.
Thanks, Andy, for that very flattering introduction. And some of it's even true. So let's carry on and see where we get here.
Excellent. Well, I ask all my guests this question, Don. Please tell our listeners the elevator pitch version of your story.
When I was growing up, I cared about two things. I love sports. I played football, basketball, and baseball in high school. And I was the skinniest starting quarterback I think they ever had for 3 years in a row, and even ended up getting recruited to college to play quarterback. And my career consisted of one interception, inglorious career. And my other great love was great literature. From my earliest days, I started reading all the plays of George Bernard Shaw. I love Shakespeare. And at Lafayette College, I majored in English literature. And then I did very well. I got a full ride to the University of Rochester and spent 4 years doing a PhD in English and American Lit. And I was about 26 years old, maybe halfway through my fourth year. And I had a major, a pause and reset. I decided that my career wasn't going anywhere. My dissertation was half finished. I had 200 pages in the drawer and didn't really know where I was going to go next. So I said, I'm either going to go to law school or business school. And the University of Rochester had this world-class business school right next door. And on the strength of my GMATs and my record and my 200 pages in the drawer, they gave me a full ride. So, and the added benefit was that when I was at Rochester, I was running all the intramural sports teams. The football team, we beat all the frat guys in football and basketball. So I got to move across the quad and still run my sports teams for the next 2 years.
Nice.
So I took my first economics class when I was 27. And, then I later when I graduated, I got a job at the Chase Manhattan Bank in an internal consulting group, which became Stern Stewart and Company, the inventors of EVA. And I was a failure as a consultant. So my boss said, Don, you have this PhD in English. My God, why don't we start a corporate finance journal? This was 1981.
Right.
And he said, I know Fisher Black. I know Merton Miller. I know Don Lessard. These guys are all going to be your board members looking over your shoulder, breathing down your neck. So we put out the first issue of the Chase Financial Quarterly in 1981. My boss, Joel Stern, was charging his corporate clients $5,000 a year to be subscribers to the first issue of the JACF. We had 20 corporate clients. And, one guy said, is this a lifetime subscription? And the first article was called Why Earnings Per Share Don't Matter. And the second article was by Tom Copeland called Stock Splits Don't Matter. And the next one was Capital Structure Doesn't Matter. And so as Joel liked to say, going to Chicago was the place where you heard the phrase, nothing matters, with greater frequency than, say, even in Berkeley, California, where he thought he had found himself. I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic story. Just the name, Fisher Black in this conversation. Most of our listeners, the vast majority of them, are not going to know who he is. But
Fisher Black wrote me a one-sentence letter with the MIT letterhead. Dear Don, why do your contributors write such beautiful articles for you? ? Yours, Fisher.
Wow.
Okay, I'll run with that. Thank you.
That's awesome. So if I asked you to pick one event in your life that you haven't described already that was just an accelerant for your career, what would that moment be?
Well, it was really the decision to leave literature or move beyond it. And when I was growing up, I was kind of reclusive, and I did not have a great social life, even though I was quarterback of the football team. And they said, "Where's Don? He's home, picking his nose, reading a book somewhere." So I decided that I wanted to. I started studying the history of ideas as part of one of my literature classes. And this got me interested in the whole idea of intellectual history and basically outward looking disciplines like business and finance. So I said, I'm going to give this a shot. I had strong mathematical skills. So I said, why don't I start to engage with the world and study business, which I hated business. I hated business people. I said, this is the last thing for me. And it ended up, being, where I finally ended up studying. So that was kind of the turning point, the decision to sort of become outward looking and start to try to understand how the world around me was working. So,
yeah. And, break down preconceptions of what it would mean to be a literature a student of literature and how to apply that. And you went into the world of finance. And so you put those two worlds together. It's a really great story of creativity. Let's start with the basics, though. We're going to talk a lot about corporate finance today. For our listeners who don't know and aren't finance experts, how do you describe the role that corporate finance plays in a business setting to people that don't have the deep understanding of corporate finance?
I after 25 years with the JACF and Stern Stewart and Company, my partners sold me and my journal to Morgan Stanley. And when I got there, I was reporting to a woman named Linda Riefler, who was a great boss. And she, in turn, reported to John Mack, the CEO. Actually, the CEO then was Vikram Pandit. And my first job on joining Morgan Stanley was to write a one-page memo defining corporate finance. I want you to tell me, what do we mean by corporate finance in 4 bullet points? I said, so I divided all of corporate finance into 4 core subjects. The first is the investment decision. That is, what is the company good at? What's the strategy? What kinds of investments do they have to make? And how do we value those investments? Yep. The second core subject is financing. How do we set up the capital structure? Do we use debt or equity? What kinds of securities do we issue? And how do we distribute capital? How do we ensure that we pay out excess capital? The third core subject was enterprise risk management. Which risks do we want the firm to take? Which ones do we want to lay off to others? And the theory of risk management is basically deciding where your comparative advantages are, going full bore on those risks, and then trying to get rid of every other risk that's getting in the way of your achieving your objective. Right. And one of my favorite examples of this, and this is something that people don't recognize, is that corporate decisions to invest their pension funds in stocks that's a major risk management decision. You are saying we're going to commit our scarce risk capital to buying stocks and bonds, which is crazy. As Fisher Black said, corporations should not be investing their defined benefit plans in stocks. That is detracting from their limited risk-bearing capacity. And Bob Merton later took that idea and created a whole company called Integrated Finance that showed companies how to, get out of businesses they should not be in, such as taking major stock portfolio risk in the defined benefit pension plan. So anyway, I'll stop with that. Oh, I'm done. Yeah. Sorry.
Number 4
is it was your fault. You didn't stop me.
Yeah.
So number 4 is internal corporate governance. How do you set up the company to ensure that everybody does the right thing? So you want to assign decision making to the right people who are closest to markets. Then you want to define their performance reward and their performance measurement and reward systems in such a way that people are rewarded for doing the right thing. And then you want to, and that was what our EVA system was all about at Stern Stewart, where I was a founding partner. And then you want to figure out how to talk to your investors. How do you explain what you're doing so that they understand your policies and become partners in helping you run the business? So that's corporate finance. It's those four things.
Yes, because in many people's heads, the finance department is, down the hall or in this other building over here. Maybe they have a notion that there's some bookkeeping happening, and the financial statements of the business get released, and at a corporate event, the CEO or the CFO stands up and talks about results, but. Those four elements of corporate finance and the way you just broke it down was really, really instructive. Now, Don, what's the most common misperception that you encounter when talking about corporate finance with non-financial managers?
For those who know what earnings per share is, the most common misconception is that all investors care about is earnings per share. All they care about is whether or not you make your next quarterly earnings. And if you do, stock prices are assumed to rise pretty much in direct proportion to the change in earnings. And that is my book is called Modern Corporate Finance. Modern Corporate Finance completely rejects that idea. Okay, that is not the mission of the corporation to produce steady increases in earnings per share. But the most common perception then is that markets are myopic. They are short-sighted. All they care about is the next quarter's EPS. Well, as Mike Jensen used to say, managers may be myopic, but markets are not. Markets are looking at the entire future distribution of future earnings and cash flows, and that's what they capitalize into the price. So again, the most common misperception is markets are incredibly short-sighted, always looking for now there's a reason people believe this, and that's that companies that pay a lot of attention to earnings and companies that don't have a lot of profitable growth opportunities will be held on a short leash, in the sense that if they hold up earnings as their measure of performance and then they fail to hit it, they are going to get punished by the markets. And that leads managers to believe that markets are short-sighted. But if you have companies that never talk about earnings, Warren Buffett never talks about earnings. Progressive Insurance would ban anyone in one of their investor meetings. You were not allowed to talk about earnings at Progressive Insurance because you clearly didn't understand the corporate mission. So if you talk about net present value, distant cash flow, you will get far-sighted investors. You will get longer-term investors, the Warren Buffetts of the world, to buy your shares, and they will care much less about earnings. And there are now studies. There's a book called The End of Accounting by Baruch Lev, in which he says the statistical correlation between, let's say, 5-year earnings and 5-year stock prices used to be something like 50% in 1970. Today, that statistical correlation is indistinguishable from zero. There's no correlation because all the companies that actually get rewarded for reporting larger. If you're a true growth company, you actually get rewarded for having larger losses because you're investing in your business. It's the Amazon story is the archetypal modern finance success story, where you just keep saying, look, folks, we don't care about earnings. We are building our business, and we will show you revenues. We'll actually show you our investment. We want you to know exactly where we're spending our dollars. And so the losses get ever larger as the market price keeps going up. So.
And the modern media really doesn't help with this misperception, because all they're talking about is earnings release. Yeah. So it's just a vicious cycle with this misperception that you are that you're cluing us in on. So, Don, next question before we take a break. Suppose that you have the chief financial officer of an organization sitting in front of you right now, And they'd like to improve the financial acumen of the stakeholders in non-financial roles in their business. So folks from marketing and product and sales. What advice do you have for the CFO to make progress to build financial acumen in the business?
No, that was actually the business that we were in. I was a founding partner of Stern Stewart and Company, a small corporate finance firm, 7 founding partners. Our job was to put in new performance measurement and reward systems into companies. For example, Coca-Cola became an EVA company, and every employee in the company was forced to go to school to learn what EVA was. It's a different measure of performance. And basically, it's the amount by which your rate of return on operating capital exceeds your cost of capital multiplied by the amount of investment. It sounds complicated, but it's far simpler than earnings per share. And so they would literally send everybody to school to learn what EVA meant for their operation. How does our operation say you conserve capital, first of all? The amount of capital used by your business is an incredibly important variable. So if you found a way to save capital in your operation, or you found new investment opportunities, you were increasing the amount of EVA or long-run value in your business. And education of employees, finance managers was a critically important operation. In fact, even the U.S. Post Office was put on EVA for 1 or 2 years. We were an advisor to the U.S. Post Office, and their results improved dramatically. And then, the administration changed, and then EVA was pushed out the door.
Don, we're going to take a really short break, and we'll be right back. Hey, it's Andy here. I've got a new podcast I'd like to introduce you to, The Saturday Morning Muse. Start your weekend with me by exploring topics that span leadership, business management, education, and other musings that are designed to support your journey of personal and professional continuous improvement. Subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. And we're back with Don Chu talking about financial acumen and the world of corporate finance. Don, let's talk about your new book, The Making of Modern Corporate Finance. If the average reader could only take one key message away from your work, what would you want that takeaway to be?
I start by saying that corporate America was failing in the 1970s because companies had turned themselves into bloated conglomerates and they were unable to deal with the inflation. Well, the answer to that was active investors stepped in with a vengeance in the 1980s. They reasserted control of companies. They ensured that they broke up the conglomerates. They squeezed excess capital out of companies like RJR and Nabisco, which is, we found that KKR paid $25 billion for a company whose market cap was $12 billion. Now, the amount of corporate waste embedded in just those two numbers is shocking and stunning. And everybody thought RJR was a well-run company. Well, the big message here is that corporate managers, U.S. corporate managers are great. They're far-sighted. But sometimes they take their eye off the ball, and active investors have to step in and correct the problem. America does this better than any other economy in the world. We have something called American-style investor-driven finance capitalism. And it means that, again, if the company's value starts sinking, some active investor, my favorite is Paul Singer of Elliott Management, will look in and say, hey, folks, we've got a problem here and we need to fix it. So we're going to intervene. We're going to talk to your other shareholders. We're not going to take you over. We're going to buy a 5% stake and get a dialogue going. So this is corporate democracy in action. You're basically making a proposition, bringing it to the attention of the other investors, and the other investors get to vote on whether or not the CEO keeps his job, whether or not they keep these operations, whether or not they start paying out capital. So again, it's shareholder activism is the guiding hand for Joseph Schumpeter's creative destruction process. corporate finance is directing that process in a way that even Schumpeter himself did not foresee. And it keeps American companies from ever getting too fat. We had a tech recession 3 years ago, and that was caused by active investors like Paul Singer getting involved inside companies and forcing them to cut back or to cut back on bad acquisitions. That's my elevator pitch.
Fantastic. So now I risk really taking us off on a tangent here, but I'm going to ask you to go back in your history in the Journal of Applied Corporate Finance and think about the just two most influential thinkers or researchers that have shaped the corporate finance world that we see today. Who are they, and what contributions did they make?
I got to make it three, and I'll make it three short ones. The first one is my old buddy Merton Miller, who basically the father of modern corporate finance, who loved the subject, didn't take his first corporate finance course till he was 33 years old, fell in love with the subject, and became its most fiercest advocate. He basically showed why finance doesn't matter. In other words, why capital structure and dividend payouts are really not fundamental to the value of the firm. The value is created by investment decisions, and the financing stuff is second order. And then the rest of modern finance, and that's the first two chapters of my book, are on why finance doesn't matter. The rest of the book is about why finance does matter. And the two most important people there are Michael Jensen and Stuart Myers. Michael Jensen showed the problem of having too little debt. Debt plays a control function in companies with excess capital. And he showed clearly the role of debt financing in helping squeeze capital out of companies with no growth opportunities who love to sit on their capital. He said the Japanese corporate governance system is failing because there's no way of getting capital out of those businesses. And sure enough, Japan has been in a 30-year recession, which no macroeconomist can explain. University of Chicago sent a whole team of macroeconomists, including Milton Friedman, to try to inject inflation into the Japanese system, and it didn't work. And macroeconomists to this day do not understand why Japan has failed for 30 years. Well, I don't know if you noticed this, but about a week ago, the Financial Times ran a piece about the Japan corporate governance system. They are now inviting American activists to come over and invest in their companies and to help reform them. And this blew my mind. This is the best confirmation you can get that, yes, Japan had a free cash flow problem as defined by Michael Jensen. Now, the other famous guy that you have to mention is America's most accomplished living corporate finance scholar, and that's Stuart Myers of MIT. And the problem he researched was, well, what happens if companies have too much debt? Surely, we can't, if you have too much debt on a growth company. And Stuart Myers talked about the corporate underinvestment problem and the debt overhang and corporate underinvestment problem. So if a company with lots of valuable growth opportunities finances itself with too much debt, it is going to pass up valuable growth opportunities because the new investors are effectively bailing out the old creditors, and they resist providing money to places where they're not getting enough of the benefit from their actions. So Stu Myers showed us why growth companies want to avoid debt financing. So between Michael Jensen and Stuart Myers, you have a perfectly good theory of corporate capital structure, one that says why debt should be used in mature companies without growth opportunities, and why growth companies should be funded almost entirely with equity. And that's what we see.
Awesome. Well, that was a master class. That was absolutely a master class of who's who and what really matters in the world of corporate finance. Tell us a little bit about the Journal of Applied Corporate Finance. What's its purpose, and what vision do you have for its future?
Well, I should say that I've been doing it for 45 years now, and I believe this is going to be its final year. So
Okay.
our funding has, I've had an amazing series of, I view them as patrons. We had every Bank of America, Continental Bank, Midland Bank of England, Accenture were all sponsors of my journal. Then Morgan Stanley for 9 years. And then my greatest patron ever, Carl Fehrenbach, who is chair of the Environmental Defense Fund and founder of Berkshire Partners, maybe the most successful private equity firm you've never heard of. Carl has been our patron and partner in the journal for the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And Carl is winding up his High Meadows Institute. And so I think we're all, shutting our doors together. And I think it's time. I'm ready to move on. But our mission has been to explain the social function and value of financial markets. How do financial markets make the world a better place? How do they create social wealth and value that gets spread around to everybody? And that is probably the most important takeaway of my book, since you asked. What is it? What does corporate finance do for the rest of us? Well, right. It guides resources to their best use, and that creates wealth that can be redistributed. There are losers in the capitalist destruction process. And the government needs to play a role, and so do corporations, in ensuring that the losers from that disruptive process don't get left behind. We need to do everything we can. So that's something.
So, Don, I want to formally go on the record here and thank you for your tenure, your service to the world of finance. I speak on behalf of many PhD students who have submitted articles, faculty members, and corporate finance professionals around the world who have gotten great value from your work. So thank you so much for that.
I should tell you that the guy who reviewed my book from the CFA, who recommended it to become a required reading, described my book as a love letter to all the people who have contributed articles to my journal and to the corporate financial system itself. And truer words were never spoke. Yeah. My journal was indeed a love letter to all the people I've had the good fortune to work with over the last 45 years.
It's just fantastic. I'm a charter holder, and that makes my heart warm. So
there'll be a quiz next week.
Yeah. So, Don, let's finish the show with some quick lightning round questions. Have a little fun here before I let you go. Question number one, you just won $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that 50% of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization. Who's the recipient?
I don't know what the recipient is, but it would be some organization dedicated to financial literacy. And by that, I mean and the CFA doesn't really do corporate finance. Am I correct in saying that?
There's a little bit.
It's literacy in what corporations do and how they do it. I just wish if there was some way to get this into the undergraduate curriculum, even the high school curriculum, I would put my money there. And that's what my book, I think my book is pitched at a little bit too high a level for high school students, or so I'm told. But see, I would like to be able to write somebody would take my book and make it accessible to high school students.
Yeah. Yeah. I am in 100% agreement with you. And I'm going to be spending a lot of this year talking about financial acumen and financial literacy, both on this show and my other show, the Saturday Morning Muse. Now, second question, Don, I give you access to a rudimentary time machine. You can send a message to an earlier version of yourself. What's the message and what's the previous version of yourself you send it to?
It would have been, why were you such I don't want to use profanities here, but you really should have paid more attention to what was going on around you. Learn how to change the damn flat tire. I know nothing about, I am a techno moron. I wish I had learned something more about technology, but I am utterly innocent of it. All I know is that finance makes technology work. Finance is what takes technology and enriches the rest of society. And one of my favorite books was the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And I would like to find a technology expert and revisit Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, including a role for corporate finance in it. Starts with technology, goes through corporate finance, and then goes to the spiritual side of existence. How does this actually illuminate possibilities for spiritual growth and show that these are all inherently connected? And because right now they are complete silos. If you look at the world, the three groups really do not talk to each other.
Right.
Even technologists think that corporate finance people are mercenary bean counters. Mercenary short-sighted bean counters. No, finance makes technology possible. It makes developments in medicine and IT. The finance directs the capital to allow these technologies to be implemented. And I'm reading Elon Musk's biography right now, and it is just the guy is a terrible manager, but he is an extraordinary creator of things. And so,
All right. So Don, we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Well, again, it's really thinking about, what is that next book I want to write? And it's really, I wrote my PhD dissertation in English on Melville, Conrad, and Faulkner, the dialectical vision of how to fuse, these romantic tendencies, which is all about self-expression, individualism, and community, the desire for community, stability, order. And these three writers are continuously going back and forth. So in my next book, I would like to find a way to sort of revisit that idea and using what I know now to actually bridge the gap between, again, self-assertion, self-expression, and how do we make our communities stronger? How do we keep them strong? So trying to do all that stuff that's my grand design.
Excellent. Don, again, thank you for all your service to the finance community over the years. It's been wonderful to talk to you, to get to know you, and to introduce you to our listeners today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's been a hell of a lot of fun.
It has. So my name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends and colleagues, especially this really educational and impactful conversation about corporate finance. The show is produced by Nicholas Temte. We'll see you next time on The Balancing Act.